Welcome everybody to Everything Websites. In today's episode, we're going to tackle one of the most debated questions in digital, which is Webflow or WordPress. But this isn't about platform war. It's a myth-busting breakdown to help you make a smarter business decision. I think after all, that's most important. Joining me today is Nat Miletic, who is a SEO expert and a founder of Clio Websites. He's helped clients scale on WordPress for years, and he's also seen, we are gonna unpacking truths about that nobody tells you about performance, SEO, plugins, content workflows, long-term costs, and many other things. We'll try to cover as many things as possible. So, Nate, without further ado, sorry for the long introduction. Welcome to the show.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah.
I usually have these debates on Twitter,
Yeah. It's always popular,
Always popular.
and
Yeah.
there is so many things we can talk about. We'll try to cover as many things as we can. And actually, guys, so the idea is to do the myth busting, like I said. So mostly we're gonna start with that. So we're gonna see where it's gonna take us. So to start with, I would start with performance, focusing on performance, hosting, and speed. So the first myth would be WordPress is slow and unreliable. So what do you think about that, Nate?
Yeah, so I hear this often, and usually, it comes down to the way people are using the tools, right? So if you're, using any tool inefficiently and you're not using the right, plugins or the right approach or even, right coding practices, of course, websites are going to be slow. So because WordPress is so popular, there's like a million different ways of doing things. What people tend to do is, they tend to like purchase like a pre-built theme or like install a bunch of plugins and then kind of like blame WordPress for the poor performance that they're getting. But really, it's usually more about choosing the right framework that's fast and efficient and not complicating the projects too much. Out of the box, when you install WordPress with like a default WordPress theme or whatever, you're going to get close to 100% on page speed insights on mobile, right? So it's all about how you use it and some of the tools and add-ons that you implement as part of the tool.
Yeah, I agree that people just don't know how it works. It might be a bit complex to start with, but I think that's the case with all tools that have a lot of functionalities. If tool is super simple to start and to learn, that means that lacks a lot of stuff. So yeah, it might be that people just don't understand it and maybe don't have energy to learn and want a quick solution. So yeah, and for the really serious website, take some time.
Yeah, it's also like, coding practices are key, right? So if you have a bunch of like inefficient images, for example, on your website, it's going to be slow no matter what platform you use. There was a guy actually on X that used to like troll me all the time. He had like a Webflow agency and he was always like, "Oh, WordPress is so slow, whatever. Webflow's better." And it was so funny. We had these like exchanges back and forth. And at one point I was like, I'm going to go look at his website, right? And I did like a page speed insights, and he had he had a very nice looking Webflow site, for the agency, but it was like horrible in terms of performance. And it wasn't because of Webflow. It was because of, he was using like 500 kilobyte PNGs everywhere, right? And I'm like, well, it goes to show you that it's not necessarily the platform. It's like how people use it.
Yeah. I think that people also like to use a lot of custom code, especially developers if they don't know how to solve this with the platform. So they just put out the custom code and that slow down the website a lot. And website performance is just one thing, one small thing. There's so many other things you need to know and to do in order to have a good performing website. So like you said, it's not about the platform, it's about the way you're using it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what about, there's some other myths that about Webflow. So we can go one WordPress, one Webflow. That Webflow is always fast and there is no need for optimization. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the same kind of principles apply, right? So you can like both of these tools out of the box, like if you just install them out of the box, they probably are fast, right? And you know, but that's the thing. Like depending on what functionality you add, and something as simple as adding large images or adding like 5 different fonts or like font weights, for example, and you're loading a font like 5 times, and you only need to load it once, for example.
Hmm.
It seems like a trivial thing, but it can impact your performance. So I
Yeah.
think both apply. Like I think it depends on your perspective. I would say like it's more like both Webflow and WordPress are probably fast out of the box, but people tend to mess it up a little bit sometimes and cause them to
Yeah.
be slow.
Yeah, especially what I seen the most is that because Webflow is usually represented as a tool that it's for designers and like you don't need to know coding and stuff, which is a lie.
Hmm.
And people just dive in and just start adding a lot of stuff and then mess everything up and website becomes slow and bad. And I think maybe it's also not that great marketing perspective of how Webflow
Yeah,
is shown to people.
that's always the trick, right? Try to make it appeal. If you try to make it appeal to too many people, then it's yeah, it gets that reputation. But it's funny because like the hardcore developers, like JavaScript and full stack developers and stuff, if you tell them about WordPress, they would say the same thing. Oh, it's for non-developers, right? It's for
Yeah.
people that just like want to use a visual builder or whatever to build a website. And the same thing. Sure you can use it that way, but you're not going to get very far.
I think it's not just about the platform, but the front end in general. I've heard from my some of my friends who are like hardcore developers that they say, "Oh, you're not a developer, you're just designer. You're just
Yeah.
designing. That's not code. That's just." So it's yeah, another thing among developers. Even if I'm more of designer than developer, but yeah.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, let's touch base a bit about the SEO now and the optimization control. So another myth is that installing Yoast or Rank Math means SEO is covered for the WordPress. What do you think about that?
Yeah, another kind of common misconception. So, in order to do SEO, you don't even need a platform, right? Like you can do SEO with HTML files, right? So it's not really that you need WordPress or one of these plugins. But I find that, these plugins help with certain things, but they can also kind of lead you down a path of like thinking exactly what you said, like, oh, I installed it, I'm getting like a green check mark or a great score,
Yeah.
and therefore I'm good to go. I'm going to start ranking on Google, right? And it's far from the truth.
I wish it's just that.
What's that?
I wish it's just that, just
Yeah,
install it and you're
if it was
done.
that easy.
Yeah.
So it's there's more to it than that. I think these tools are helpful for sure in order to help you like not overlook certain things.
Mm.
One of the famous ones is like sometimes when we're developing websites in the dev environment, we turn off indexing, right? And so these tools sometimes warn you like, hey, like watch out, your indexing is turned off, right?
Mm.
So when you're done and when you make it live, you better turn that off, right? Especially if you're doing a migration from an old site to a new one, you don't want to lose like. So like that's just a silly example, but that's just one example where these tools are useful. But I would say don't follow them blindly, and definitely it's not a given. If you're getting 100% on these tools that you're going to rank on Google. So they help, but yeah, you need more sort of in terms of you need to do a lot more from an SEO perspective. And technically, you don't need any tool. You just need to know good SEO practices, and you can do SEO with any platform.
Exactly. Webflow does not have tools like that, but I think they're pretty cool because help you, like you said, just help you with the process and everything, but you should not just rely on them blind.
Yeah, does Webflow have a SEO kind of plugin? I thought there was one.
I don't really know. I don't use it. I know that everything you need, you can just set up directly on the platform.
Hmm.
And, the on page and technical SEO, part of the technical. And the rest is, following the Google Search Console and Google Analytics and all these kind of tools so that you can know how the website performs and what you need to change. But, like you said, I mean, this is just small part of the SEO. There is a lot of things that matter if you want to rank well. Even if you just someone see you on search results, doesn't mean they're going to click. Then you need to work on A/B testing to see, or I mean, I don't know if actually technically it is possible to A/B test title tag meta description, but you need to work on that as well, because maybe it is what they want to see, but they're not going to click and so on.
I
Let's
like
go.
I
Yeah.
like the fact that in Webflow you can edit like the information right in the platform. Like in default WordPress, you can't do that unless you're using a plugin. So that's sometimes why we install plugins. Like if we want to have the most common example is like home, right? So if you name your homepage home, you
Mhm.
don't want that to show up in the title in the meta, right? So in order to modify that, you either need to do it with code or you need a plugin in order to update that. There's nothing in the interface.
Yeah.
Some builders some builders have that, like Bricks Builder, for example, has that option, which I like, but not in the default WordPress. There's nothing like that. So you do need a plugin. But the plugins are useful for sure for things like that. And we use them all the time when we're working on SEO. But it's not going to make you
Another thing
rank
with the
automatically.
plugin, yeah, another thing with the plugin is that you need to be careful. You know, just have them too many, otherwise it's also a bad
Yeah,
thing.
for sure. Definitely.
But yeah, what I love about the Webflow is that for this kind of thing is that on the page settings, when you're in designer mode, or when you click to see the page settings, you can set up the title tag, meta description, open graph image. You can do a custom code for header and footer directly on the page. Like everything is one place. So I kind of like that. Myth about the SEO for Webflow. Webflow isn't a serious SEO platform, but I think we kind of covered that as well.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I run an SEO agency as well, and we work with clients that are using Webflow, Wix, Squarespace, WordPress, everything, right? So it doesn't prevent us from doing SEO, no matter what the platform is. So yeah, I've been around a long time, in this business. So to me, it's like it's just another tool like to do the job. And it's funny though, but it's like when you get used to one platform, you prefer it, obviously. So it's like you get frustrated. So it's always like I saw your meme. It's like going from another CMS to Webflow. For me, it's like going from Webflow to like back to WordPress. It's like,
I
it's
mean,
so nice,
it
you
can be
know?
like you said, that can be used for any platform. If you're used to that platform and you just it feels right to you, so you can kind of use it in any case. Yeah, let's keep going because we 30 minutes and not even started.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the plugins and built-in tools. Like I said, WordPress myth, more plugins equals more power. What do you think about this?
I mean, like plugins are great. I do think it's beneficial to have a plugin developer sort of platform that, people can create their own plugins. And even from a business perspective, like, launching plugins for a platform that has such a huge market share is beneficial. In terms of using them for your website, more doesn't mean better for sure. So you have to be careful. There's also another myth that like having a bunch of plugins is going to slow down your website. It really doesn't work that way. It's like you can have one really bad plugin that can slow down your website, or you can have like 20 plugins that don't have any impact at all, right? A lot of plugins do things only in the back end. For example, we develop our own plugins sometimes for certain functionality, but that doesn't really translate into like what happens in the front end. So it doesn't impact performance, but it does have other trade-offs. The trade-offs are more from like a maintainability perspective. So plugins can need to be updated, they need to be maintained. So if a plugin gets abandoned, for example, and it gets dropped by the developer or something, if you have too many, you might not notice it, so you might run into like security issues and stuff like that. So while they're powerful and they're useful, I would just say like be cautious. What I like to recommend to people is like, you know, pick a plugin that does what you need it to do and maybe a more comprehensive one. A great example of that is like we use Elementor Pro. And Elementor has a lot of things built into it. So, for example, it has like forms, it has like pop-ups, it has like all of this different functionality, so that you don't need 5 different plugins. You could just use Elementor for everything.
Mhm.
So try, like I always tell people, try to do that, like try to repurpose an existing plugin, or sometimes try to do something, challenge yourself a little bit to do something with code if you can, where it might not add as much of a technical risk or as much of a performance problem as adding a plugin for everything.
Yeah, I agree that it's important to know code, even to know how to use code, even if you're using a no-code tools.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, there is some stuff that sometimes you just need to know it, otherwise you're gonna be stuck and
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't, you definitely can't rely. So in WordPress, it's easy to rely on plugins for everything just because there's so many,
yeah,
just because there's like, it's a big platform, right? So I think people sometimes, get used to that. So they're like, their first default's like, oh, let's find a plugin for this thing that I
yeah.
need, right?
I know that Webflow does not have plugins, and yeah, one of the myths is that it can scale because it doesn't have plugins. I mean, I would argue because uh, doesn't have plugins, they do not call it like that, but they do have apps,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like that.
It's same thing, just different name.
Yeah, yeah, they do have apps like native, let's call it like that, the integrations for Make, Zapier, MemberStack. There is one from one team from Balkans, OptiBase for A/B testing, and there is also, I mean, there's many, not as many like plugins for WordPress, but they're kind of the same thing when you look at it.
Yeah. I
So
think with Webflow too, it's still like a newer platform than WordPress, obviously. So I'm sure like as it gets more popular, people are gonna you'll have more and more plugins, I'm sure apps or whatever, that people
yeah,
create for the platform. So it's just
I
gonna
just hope that the platform itself will develop more solutions within the platform, because it's just better for performance and for everybody. I mean, to be
yeah,
honest.
and they're gonna maintain it, right? So that's
Yeah,
another thing.
yeah. Regarding the CMS, yeah, so that's another thing. It says that the WordPress is the only choice for serious content teams. What do you think about this one?
Well, I mean, it does make it easy in some aspects if you have a big team to like create content and have a good CMS, out of the box. But there's so many different options these days. Again, if you ask like the developer purists, they would say that actually use something else like Next.js or something like that, or another, some flavor of React, CMS or whatever. So it's like depending on who you ask, right?
Yeah.
I think the benefit is like you. So sometimes you can use like headless CMS as well,
Mhm.
or use a WordPress in headless mode, so that you can use the backend of WordPress to like manage the CMS and then have your application on like a JavaScript framework or whatever as well. That's another option. But there's other tools. I think, like I said again, we've used the Webflow one as well, and it's pretty good. We've used like all of the platforms now have some form of a CMS. Wix as well. We've used theirs. So there's a lot of different options. Again, WordPress is the biggest platform, so it's just like it has that reputation, right? It started off as a blogging platform, so it still
I,
has that
I think that
reputation.
I think the WordPress is the first CMS in platform in the world. That's why it's so popular, and there's like half of the websites ever built in
Yeah.
WordPress.
I think I can't remember if there was like there was Joomla as well and a few other ones. I can't remember. I think Joomla might have been even before WordPress, but I'd have to look it up. So there were a few other ones before, but it's like, yeah, it's probably, I think they were around the same time, kind of like coming up.
Beginning of 2000s.
Yeah, yeah,
I
early
did some
2000.
research on that. There was some, but I forgot the name. There was some platform, like they called it the first platform to build something. I don't know that people. I don't remember if people built websites or what. It was in the 90s,
Hmm.
and that platform was so popular that Yahoo, I think, acquired them in a couple of years after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they were kind of considered first, but I forgot the name. I did it for one research, one presentation that I had. So I used it.
There's probably some that we don't even know about that were like, like
They were active for a couple of
in the
years.
90s or something as well.
Yeah.
That, so there's, yeah, when I started, actually, I was a big, like, one of the first languages I learned was .NET. So like for example, in those days, I was like, I coded everything from scratch before I started WordPress, and I made my own CMS in ASP.NET, because that's what I was familiar with.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, WordPress, like, no, I'm not going to use that. Like, I have my own. It's way better.
Yeah. I think in the end, from a business perspective, using platforms is just better for teams because you don't need to be a technical person and you will be able to handle the website, the content, all the important stuff that's important for marketing. I think
Yeah.
that's why they're so popular. And of course, saves you a lot of time and money.
Yeah, for sure. We work with a lot of big companies that have, or like medium sized companies that have like content teams, and um, they're marketing people primarily. And so what they do is they go into the WordPress CMS, they create content, they added content and stuff in like Google Docs sort of like view, right? So for them, it's really easy, and that's the benefit of it. But what about Webflow? See, how do you handle
Webflow,
CMSs there?
yeah, there is a myth for that Webflow cannot handle dynamic content and complex CMS, which is, yeah, I mean, that's not true. But I hear it many times that people think that Webflow can handle just a small websites, small marketing websites. I didn't work with super large websites, but for example, Urosh from Flow Ninja, when I had a podcast with him, he told me that they built a website with hundreds of thousands CMS items and Webflow works just fine. So I don't think that's true. I didn't work with that many, a couple of thousand, but it was still working pretty fine. So I don't think that's the true. So Webflow can be used as well for pretty complex websites. It's not a platform if you want to build a web app. Even initially they start with that, but they just gave up and like we don't care about that anymore. Just enterprise companies, and they're focusing mostly on that. But yeah, don't worry. There is no need to worry about if Webflow can handle a lot of pages and even pretty complex stuff.
We used it for one client. We used Webflow for setting up a CMS, and it worked just fine. Like, you can do a lot of the things that
Mm.
you can do with WordPress as well. And actually with Webflow, you can the base Webflow comes with CMS functionality that you can implement.
Mhm.
With WordPress, you need a plugin. So you usually need a plugin to define. I mean, you can do it with code as well, but you need to be a bit tech savvy. So what people usually use is they use like a plugin to add custom post types and add like different content. But the only thing that I know is the big difference, and something like I always caution people against, is you don't run into this scenario often, but since you mentioned it, it's like Webflow does have that crazy licensing
Mm.
like tiers, so that if you do hit, I can't remember what it is. It's like 60,000 items or something, or
No, I
it's like
think
in the
there's some
thousands.
limited, but it's a bandwidth limited.
Okay. I thought there was some guy, I've seen a few people post like they hit like 60,000 items or something in Webflow, and then they got like this huge bill because they got bumped up to like the enterprise tier or something. So that's the only thing I would like be careful of. But it's not very common you're going to have that many items.
But yeah, but also, I mean, if you have 60,000 items, that means your website is huge and it's worth a lot. So obviously, but in that case, if you just don't like the platform, just go somewhere else where it can. But it's still, I think it's going to be very expensive to host such a website. It's just a monster website.
For sure.
Um,
And by the way, sorry to go back to this, but
yeah, yeah,
Drupal was the first. It was before
yeah.
WordPress. Drupal was the platform
Drupal
in
is still very
2000.
popular. It's not like nobody
Yeah.
uses it anymore.
So Drupal, there's still like pockets of it, and people still use it. And but yeah, like it was the first, so you would think it would
Yeah.
be more popular
But
than.
I think that I think they're focusing more on like enterprise companies, like super
Yes.
large websites, and they're like number one for that. That's where Webflow trying to compete right now.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's good. I didn't know. I mean, I thought it's WordPress because I mean, back in the day, everybody tried to have something, and for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, WordPress is the most popular because it was simplest to use and super cheap. So that's why I think it was becoming popular. Yeah, okay. But there was something else I want. Yes, about the CMS. I don't know how it looks like in WordPress, but in Webflow, the thing that I like is the editing mode. When you want to edit even the CMS, if you don't want to give someone access to designer mode where you can actually break something, you give them access to the editor mode, which looks like you're opening a website in a browser and you're literally clicking on text and writing, on top, deleting that, writing something new, changing images, links and stuff. How that works with the WordPress when you give someone right to just edit.
Yeah, you can. So there's different tiers of access. So you have like admin access, which would be the same as
Mhm.
in Webflow, where you have like full developer access to all the plugins and stuff. And then they have different like levels other than administrator. The next one is like editor and author, and then just like subscriber.
Yeah, Webflow is something
So the
similar.
editor gives you like that sort of like edit access without like messing around with the back end too much. And the sorry, yeah, editor access, and then author access is like gives you the ability to add CMS items. So you can add CMS items, but the editor has to approve them from kind of proceeding to the next stage, kind of thing. So there are different tiers, and you can kind of limit who sees what and who does what
Yeah.
in WordPress as well. I do like the Webflow editor mode. I've used it before as well. And I do like that because it's the same thing. So you could do things visually, but you can't kind of mess things up too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
With WordPress, it is a little bit different. So if you give somebody editor mode and they can update pages, they can like inadvertently change the layout or something and mess something up by
Yeah.
accident, you know? And I found that I did like that with Webflow a little bit more. That when you have editor, it's like you can just like you can't like mess up the
Yeah.
layout. You can just like edit content and stuff, which is I think a little bit smoother.
Yeah. They're working also on all of this stuff where you or team organ structure and everything, who can do what.
Hmm.
And especially with this landing pages and components building, you can be actually. But I didn't dive too deep into this stuff.
Hmm.
They're working on improving so that you will be more flexible, even for a non-technical person, to even create new pages and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a balance in WordPress. You can lock things down, so it depends on how you develop a site. You can also like create fields, or you can just allow them to edit. Like you could create a template, for example, for a page, and they could just edit the text in the back end, and it would just like render a template and show up in a certain way in WordPress so that they can't modify the front end. Sometimes it's a bit tricky because you sometimes you want to give them the ability to create pages, for example, with Elementor. When you do that, then you have to give them access to change the layouts as well. So there's like different levels of access. You can get very granular in WordPress, and you can lock it down quite a bit so that they can only edit text and images and stuff. Some people prefer to do it that way so that the clients can't really change the layout and like wreck the website. However, clients tend to hate that because sometimes they are a little bit more savvy and they do want to like add a new picture or move
Yeah.
stuff around or whatever.
Okay, I need to say that we are already on a 30 minute
Perfect. Yeah. Let's
yeah
keep it
mark. We'll need to bring it in a close soon. But I just want to talk about a few other things before that. I think we spoke a bit about the learning curve and stuff. So
moving.
just keep that, because we said, I mean, for a tool that can perform a lot of actions, needs to be a bit complex. I mean, cannot be super simple. But I want to talk about the cost, and ownership and all of that on WordPress and Webflow. So one of the myths is WordPress is cheaper because it's free and open source. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I wouldn't say cheaper. Like, I mean, you're just like the way I look at it is, you still need to maintain the platform. So either you're doing that yourself or you're hiring somebody to do that. And what I mean by that is like, while I believe in open source and I think open source is a great model because for various reasons, we won't have time to talk about that too much. But the other side of that coin is that, you do need to maintain certain things on your own. So, such as the back end, updating plugins, updating the version of WordPress and so forth. And sure, you can set everything to auto update and not worry about it until it breaks, right? But
Yeah.
there's some maintenance involved, right? So either you're doing that yourself or you're paying somebody to do that. With more of like a sort of like closed platform that isn't open source, you're kind of like paying the vendor to do that instead. So that's the difference. So it's like, it's not like this one's cheaper or this one's more expensive. It's like you're either doing some of that stuff on your own or you're paying a vendor to take care of that stuff for you.
Exactly, because I heard many times that people say like, "Oh, WordPress is cheap and Webflow is very expensive." I mean, it's not that expensive, but also if you are just starting out, you can just go with some template and you just change the text and images and you have a website. I mean, it really depends on what stage you are and what you're expecting from websites to do for you and your business. So yeah, that's kind of, I wouldn't dive too deep into this kind of stuff, but I think on top of this, it's about that. Just trying to speed it up a bit, or I shouldn't. Okay, so one more, and we can wrap up. Yeah, I think you mentioned this actually, but let me ask. WordPress being open source means it's a risk-free and forever future-proof platform.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like a naive way of looking at it for sure. Like I said, I'm a big fan of WordPress and the open source movement for sure. But you're just, yeah, if there's always risk, right? Like recently we saw there was some drama in the WordPress space with the inventor of WordPress and a big company in the WordPress space that like caused a rift, in the
Flooding.
community and caused some people to doubt that. There is a benefit, of course, of like, yes, you could take the code of WordPress, you can run it on your own server forever, right? But if it's not maintained, if the project for whatever reason stops maintaining the platform, you're running a big security risk unless you're like updating the backend yourself and tweaking the code and stuff. So nothing's risk free, in tech, unfortunately. WordPress does give you some advantages over closed platforms, but the closed platforms also give you the advantage of having a team behind basically maintaining the platform, right? So it's like some things are better with open source, some things are better with closed platforms. I think I'm still a big fan of open platforms personally, just because I do feel there's a little bit less of a risk of vendor lock in. So that's a big one for me. When you're locked into the ecosystem and a platform, they can do whatever. Like Webflow could decide to sell the platform to somebody. They could decide to like jack up the price 10 times, whatever. That's always a risk, right? You don't have that risk necessarily with open source, but you have other risks with open source. So it's like, it's hard to say which risk is a bigger risk, right? There's risks in all of these things, especially in tech, since like things are always changing so
Yeah,
quickly.
I kind of prefer more of a closed platform like Webflow because I don't really, I mean, I know that some of these things can happen, but they don't actually happen that often. And I really like that platform handles all of these kind of things and I can just go to them if I have any problems. And I know that for most of my clients and people I am working with, they just don't want to think about this stuff that much. They just want to get it done. They want to have a website they can control, control in a way that control the content they produce and these kind of things. And they don't really care much about this. But of course, there are other security stuff that you can do in order to make the website safe. But like you said, things if they sell, yeah, you pretty much there's no many things you can do unless just go to some other platform.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, I mean, we don't know. That's not something that's happening all the time. It does happen. I cannot say it doesn't, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen to Webflow at least.
It doesn't happen very often, no. The biggest risk I find with closed platforms is like they jack up the price and you're like, oh man, so now I like either have to stay with them. You feel like you're trapped, right? Or you got to switch platforms. That's the biggest risk I find with these platforms. And not just this platform, like any tool, really. So we've used some tools where it's like, wow, like, they tripled in price overnight. And we're like, what are they thinking, right? But
Yeah,
sometimes you're
Webflow is
like, oh,
changing the pricing very often, especially recently. I mean, past year, but it's not like huge increase in price. It's like a couple of bucks here and there. But if they add some new feature, like for example localization, they charge you extra for that. I don't know if WordPress have that feature or you just duplicate pages. For example, how WordPress deal with this?
so with translation specifically or new functionality?
For example, yeah.
Yeah, so for translations, you there's a plugin for translation that's really popular and good, and so the plugins have an additional cost too. So you have to pay for the premium plugin usually
Yeah.
for something like this to work, anyways. The only thing with WordPress that's one of the nice things about it is like with the hosting side, if the hosting provider decides to change the price, you can easily back up your site and move it to another host, for example, to save on cost or to get some other improvements. Sometimes you pay a little bit more, but get way better performance on another hosting environment and stuff like that. But the plugins are independent, so the plugins are developed by other people, right? So they can do whatever they want, and sometimes you're locked in by the plugin developers. So
Yeah.
that's the
But
fun stuff about tech.
yeah, yeah. That can be sometimes also a double-edged sword, but in most cases, is it's a pretty good thing because, like you said, you can just go to someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's wrap it up now because yeah, we're already on a 40-minute mark. So for the end, like a last question, what do you think the what's the one myth that you wish that more people are stop believing in for WordPress?
For WordPress specifically,
Well, I mean, you can go both. Doesn't matter.
yeah, I think for me, I think what I want to leave people with is the myth that like one platform is better than another platform, whatever it is, Webflow, WordPress, Squarespace, Wix, whatever, custom code,
Now
like,
even Figma sites.
or the new Figma sites, exactly. So, it's like it's how you use the platform. There's that saying like a bad craftsman blames the tools, right? And so you can make awesome websites on any platform. What I would say to new people starting out is like pick a platform and get proficient in it. You can be successful in Webflow, WordPress, Wix, whatever it is, maybe even Figma sites. So you can be proficient in all of those, and whatever you choose, like learn it deeply, and you can deliver good quality projects with any of those tools.
Awesome, man. For me, I would just say that the biggest misconception is that you don't need to know coding to use these tools. I mean, you generally don't need, but I mean, from my experience, you always run into some issue that you really need to know code in order to solve it, or even if you just have integration with a Salesforce or some platform, and you just need to know code. It's going to be easier, at least, for you to understand the problem and to know to find the best possible solution. Because in the end of the day, you will always need to use it at some point, at least a little bit. So that's for me.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's a
so
good
much.
one. No
Yeah.
problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being part of this amazing episode. I mean, I was enjoying it really. It was awesome. I heard a lot of good tips and good things that some even things that I didn't know about WordPress. I think it's awesome. Can you just tell people where they can find you, where they can learn more about you and see of your
Yeah.
some of your content?
Yeah, definitely. I'm active on LinkedIn, on X and Twitter, or previous Twitter. You can find me on there. My handle is the same, first and last name, Nat Miletic. And check out our website as well, cliowebsites.com. You can contact me through there as well. I check all those emails and stuff as well. So I'm easy to find.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Again, thank you so much. And guys, see you next time. Let me know in the comments what you think about this and if you want more stuff like this. See ya. Bye. Okay. Ta-ta.